Less than a week into the new year, I was in the small town of Waitara to observe the rail activity on the old branch line, and go for a train ride, of course. Incidentally, this video was partially intended as a remake of last year's Waitara video, since I actually remembered to bring the D5600 camera this time. The town of Waitara, not to be confused with Waitara Railway Station in Sydney, Australia, is located around 15 kilometres northeast of New Plymouth. The railway line here originally opened in 1875 as part of a direct route to New Plymouth, but despite the opening of Port Taranaki in 1884, it remained in operation to serve the freezing works in Waitara, a purpose it served for many years. Meanwhile, the original junction for the Martin to New Plymouth line was at Century Hill, but this was relocated to Lepperton in 1908. Regular freight trains continued running to Waitara until 1997, when the freezing works closed down. The branch was closed under Transrail in 1999, but it was fortunately saved by the Waitara Railway Preservation Society. Since 2003, they've been running popular excursion trains along the branch, and have been able to run all the way to the old Lepperton yard since 2020. These days, the train's departure point in Waitara is from an abridged siding that stops just before West Quay, but the lack of a station building makes this spot look very bizarre indeed. For the longest time, the star of the show on this branch was DSC 2584, but she hasn't run for at least 4 years now. These days, the passenger train would normally be hauled by the recently restored Portland 11, built by W.G. Bagnall in 1958. But on the day I visited in early 2025, something very different was hauling the train instead. Thinking back to DSC 2584, I have at least one piece of footage from the days when she was still running, and here it is. Usually, the Waitara Railway runs their train on the first and third Sunday of each month between September and April. The tickets cost $20 for adults and $10 for children aged between 5 and 15, but the crew can only take payments in cash. In any case, I hope this video can raise awareness of this curious little railway, and that people consider visiting it for themselves. On the morning of Sunday, January 5, we arrived in Waitara with plenty of time to spare before the train's departure at 11 AM. After running empty down the hill from Brixton, Locomotive number 222 ran around her train and propelled it along to where the passengers were already waiting. 222 was built by A&G Price of Thames in 1968, and originally worked for Pacific Steel in Auckland, more specifically, the suburb of Otahuhu. In 1997, she was acquired by Transrail, the operators of New Zealand's national rail network at the time, and designated as a DSA, despite being completely different from the traditional DSA shunters built by Bagnall, Hunslet, or Drury. In any case, DSA 222 was later redesignated as TR 1026, but remained in the Otahuhu/Westfield yards well into the KiwiRail era. Indeed, there was a time when you could see Price 222 and a TR 459 parked at Westfield from on-board passing AM electric trains. KiwiRail sold 222 in July 2021, but it wasn't until December of that year when she arrived on the Waitara branch. I had already known about this locomotive for many years, but never had the chance to see her running until this latest trip to Waitara. As for the train 222 was hauling, this consisted of 56-foot passenger coach A56536, built in 1939, and open coach EA 3298, whose history I know almost nothing about. All I know is that she was rebuilt from a former crane tender and entered service in 2022. She replaced the much smaller NAK 6078 as the railway's open-air wagon. The Waitara branch is 7.2 kilometres long, and a round trip takes around 70 to 85 minutes to complete. The route may not be anywhere near as scenic as the Transalpine's run from Christchurch to Greymouth, but there are still some interesting things to look out for as you trundle along towards Lepperton. While the train was quite popular, this means all the seats in A56536 were taken, so I spent most of the journey standing in EA 3298. Soon after leaving the siding by the supermarket, the railway climbs out of Waitara on a 1 in 40 incline, which is apparently the steepest grade on any heritage railway in New Zealand. As for the section going through the trees, it reminds me of the Driving Creek Railway up on the Coromandel Peninsula. Passing the Society's yard at Waitara Road in Brixton, where we see DSC's 2257 and 2584 stored in one of the sidings.
It's not like a traditional caboose.
What do you mean the traditional?
Like traditional caboose goes like this, and he's like
After passing Century Hill, the Waitara train runs parallel to KiwiRail's Martin to New Plymouth line for at least 1 kilometre before arriving at the old yard in Lepperton. This is where the locomotive has to be uncoupled and run around her train for the return trip to Waitara.
Slow it down.
And now for the run back to Waitara, which was made at just as leisurely a pace as the run out to Lepperton. As we ran back through Brixton, I managed to get this photograph of AD 1432, one of the two coaches that arrived on the Waitara branch in November 2022. Incidentally, I managed to see ADs 1403 and 1432 when they were still stored in Wellington. This was back in October 2022. Further up that same siding, we see TR 407 and Portland 11 sitting together. The last time I remember seeing TR 407 in action was in March 2021. After all the passengers disembarked, 222 didn't hang around long because she needed to shunt the coaches away to the loop so she could run round again. 222 still had another passenger run leaving at 1:30 p.m, so during the layover, her prime mover was shut down and the crew went off for a lunch break. The passengers started turning up around 35 minutes before the departure time, and this second trip turned out to be just as popular as the first. Considering the fact that the Waitara Railway Preservation Society hasn't been around all that long, especially when compared to the likes of Glenbrook and Goldfields, and despite the very limited infrastructure, I'd say they're still doing very well for themselves. As an aside, this is one of those rare occasions where you don't get in trouble for getting right up close to a locomotive. I can safely say that I enjoyed this latest visit to the Waitara Railway, and I can confidently recommend checking it out for yourself if you're in the area on one of their running days. I'll leave you with the footage of 222 leaving Waitara for her second trip of the day.